For as long as I can remember, Microsoft always promised that its technology would define the future of gaming, but between its overpriced Game Pass, cloud streaming, and now the new Copilot, the company thinks it's presenting itself as innovative, but to me, they couldn't have been more wrong. When we compare their ecosystem to how Steam actually operates, it shows something that Linux users have been saying for years, and that is, Microsoft was never for the consumer. With their Windows and Xbox, users all over the world feel like it's becoming a greedy subscription company, and when Steam comes into the picture, its platform and devices like the Steam Deck unintentionally expose Microsoft's identity of being a corporate service funnel, with higher-ups making the game industry worse off than ever before. Ironically, Valve didn't need to attack Microsoft this whole time because they've been showing us how different philosophies lead to very different outcomes for players and developers. I don't know where people got the idea that Steam's a monopoly when their actions show that it's clearly a pro-consumer platform. But you know what? I could understand why they think that way. When anything offers great experiences and a lot of people are drawn to them, it creates the illusion of a monopoly when in actuality it's just plain old dominance. What I noticed throughout the years is that Valve's strength didn't come from controlling PC gaming. It came from revolutionizing it and making their products more flexible, like their Proton Lair for Linux and modding workshops on Steam. Even though the platform's closed-sourced, the company sure makes it feel like we can customize it however we want, especially with their Steam OS on Linux. You see, these ideas for some reason don't resonate with Microsoft, and to their own detriment, they avoid separating their products and instead combine and integrate everything directly onto Windows. They keep drifting towards telemetry and trying to gain as much user data to market more products instead of making the OS more efficient. They have that crappy Xbox app, the Microsoft Store that nobody shops in, and other background services that slow down our game experience. When any of those layers become corrupt or fail all of a sudden, Windows becomes like a falling Jenga tower. We've seen this many times with Xbox Live outages breaking multiplayer experiences, Game Pass logins not authenticating offline play properly, and Windows Update interrupting sessions and glitching out games. When I go on Steam, I sometimes see this weakness when running them, and when Microsoft ties our gameplay to constant system checkups and validations, we'll end up using more power to run things that are redundant. We always see Microsoft leaders so proud of Game Pass like it's the next big thing, but behind it all are some of the worst practices for game development. Now, I've always understood why people go for subscriptions like Disney and Netflix, but I could never wrap my head around why they'd get one for video games. What I realized recently is that the subscription model changes incentives, because instead of making games people actually want to buy, studios are pushed to make games that people will technically rent for a short period of time. And with Microsoft tracking our engagement hours and retention, that just gives them authority to keep going and experiment however they want. It's interesting because developers like Swen from Larian Studios have warned repeatedly that when subscription platforms start deciding what gets made, it can become much harder for genuinely good content to survive. And you know what? He's absolutely right about that. On services like Game Pass, a game can be heavily played, and yet that attention doesn't always translate into real market value. Instead of players choosing to buy a game right off the bat, the subscription converts its worth into these engagement metrics, which can change how creators get paid and how game prices are perceived. When we look at Steam, on the other hand, its metrics like sales, reviews, and community growth actually reflects real demand, while Game Pass hides behind retention charts instead of getting players to vote with their wallets. It is definitely a problem, but what's worse is that anytime Microsoft finds itself failing on one side of the game industry, it throws money around and acquires small companies to fix the issue. In just the past few years, they got Bethesda, Activision, Obsidian, and I could go on, guys. It's kind of weird because instead of innovating and having healthy competition, they're just buying everything out, and you know whenever this happens, studios end up being tainted under Microsoft's rule. What I noticed is they slow down release dates and destroy the heart of what made the developers have creative output in the first place. It all depends on their return on investment, and once developers reach that quota, Microsoft just shuts them down like any game over screen. We saw this before with projects like Hi-Fi Rush, and how being managed by the Xbox team didn't help anyone because they've set the bar too high for things that didn't fit any studio's strengths. And you could see the same thing after they bought Blizzard, because not even 3 months in, Microsoft turned around and laid off 1,900 people across its gaming divisions. Honestly, I wasn't surprised hearing this because we've seen this happen before, and when studios have to integrate into Microsoft's massive infrastructure, things get real messy. That's what I mean when I say that the company is becoming too overbloated. At some point, studios owned by large corporations corporations will stop listening to players and start doing things based on a shareholder strategy. And when we look at Valve, they don't want that headache, so they avoid buyouts and instead give developers an opportunity to grow through Steam. Just by doing that, the creators get to keep experimenting and making games like Hollow Knight and Silksong. One of the things that makes this even more frustrating is that most developers use Windows to make games, and many have talked about the many issues with background services and AI tools like Copilot. Those telemetry and random features can interfere with workflows that sometimes slow down development. When AI systems auto-generate code or logic, they don't always do it efficiently, which can lead to memory waste or performance conflicts. After that, developers have to dig back into the source code to figure out where the AI went wrong, and that can be a tedious process. And it doesn't help when a Windows update suddenly appears and breaks GPU drivers or essential tools. When these things happen, gamers notice that it's all just poorly optimized, so what some of them do is make it a mission to mod applications to run better. I think you know this by now, but Microsoft hates when people do that because they don't want their programs to be tampered with. And that leads me to my next point. Valve appreciates modders more than any other company I've ever heard of. Steam Workshops exists because the team understands that some players fix games faster than studios can patch them. Meanwhile, Game Pass titles can't be modded properly without hacks, and that doesn't just annoy players. It actually makes those games irrelevant at some point. I think Steam kind of exposes all that when they let communities do the work that Windows try to block, and at the end of the day, it all goes back to one big difference. Steam treats games like things we own, while Microsoft treats them like services we access, and there's a lot to unpack there. And yeah, I talked about it more in one of my videos, you can check it out right up here, but I think that real ownership of games should influence modding and optimizations for long-term support so we can keep playing them whenever we want. Microsoft's idea of progress isn't actually saving the industry, it's standardizing it and trying to automate it, and when they do that, they're slowly diluting creativity. And you know what? I think the game industry won't die because technology gets worse. It'll die because platforms stop prioritizing players and start serving platform standards instead. Microsoft for some reason keeps trying to reinvent gaming like it's a broken system when in actuality it's doing just fine without them. I would say Steam's the perfect example of how big corporations should behave because instead of fixating on greed, they operate on freedom and flexibility for the consumer. It's kinda cool because I posted a comment with the same idea on someone else's video and got tons of likes on it. It just goes to show that there's a bunch of people who have the same idea as me when it comes to Steam. I know that right now we're all waiting on the Steam machine, and with Microsoft and all these big tech companies investing in AI, it's actually inflating hardware prices, which is adding more layers to the problem. It's kind of interesting now because it seems like this bubble's about to burst, and you know what? I'm just gonna sit back, relax, and watch it all come crashing down. Anyways guys, that's all I got for today. If you like hearing about how Microsoft's ruining all kinds of things, make sure to like and subscribe for more. See ya.